Welcome back, everyone. Today I have for you guys my top 10 most terrifying albums I've ever listened to in my life. So these are the albums that have horrified me the most, made my hair stand on edge, give me goosebumps, and made me feel like I was walking through hell. Some of these albums are more enjoyable than some of the other ones on my list. There'll be kind of a range of accessibility, but I encourage you guys all to leave your own list down below in the comments, because what works for me might not work for you. Let me know down below in the comments which albums have you listened to that have terrified you the most. And if you guys like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends to help boost this channel and the algorithm. And with that out of the way, let's get into the list. So kicking us off at number 10, we have Gnaw Their Tongues, All the Dread Magnificence of Perversity. Quite the album title, if I do say so myself. Gnaw Their Tongues is quite an interesting band. They fuse together industrial metal with black metal, dark ambience, and a bunch of other different things. Out of all the albums I'm going to mention today, this is the least accessible. Most people are probably going to go check this album out, listen to it for 5 seconds, think, this is just going to give me a headache, I'm not listening to this, and shut it off. But if you can sit through it for more than 5 minutes, I promise you this album is a great album, despite it being kind of on the border of music and noise. It has amazing progressions, it has great vocal performances, so many things about this album I love, but it is not an easy album to listen to. It's very noisy, it's very out there, sometimes it just feels too damn harsh to listen to, like you're gonna get a headache if you put it on for any longer. It's the album on my list that sounds the most like you're being sonically tortured, and for that reason it might be the most extreme album on my list, but it's not the most terrifying. I've had some more terrifying experiences than this one, so I have that at number 10. Let's move on to number 9. At number 9, I have the most vocally impressive album I will mention today. Although it's impressive, it is pretty dire and not easy to listen to. These are screams that are guttural, screams that are beautiful at times, but make you really feel the pain and the passion coming from the singer. And it's, of course, Lingua Ignota's Caligula. Now, I could mention so many of her albums on this list today. She is one of the most talented artists working today. Not the easiest to listen to, I will say. But if you can sit through one of her albums, you'll see that she creates a world unlike any other. She builds cathedrals with her voice, and she has one of the most magnificent vocal ranges I've ever heard. She can scream gutturally, make it growl. She can also hit high notes and make things sound beautiful. And she combines that in this album, in an album that's very challenging too at the same time. A little bit of background for you guys that don't know. Lingua Ignota was in a relationship with another artist that I'll mention later on this list. Unfortunately, that relationship didn't go all too well. It was incredibly abusive, and Lingua Ignota, her actual name is Christian Hayter, suffered through some pretty horrible abuse in that relationship. And this album, along with a couple of her other albums, have been kind of her cathartic expression of those horrible moments in her life. And it's some powerful, powerful music, and horrifying at so many moments throughout this album. So I will mention the other artist that she was in a relationship later on this list, because he also created one of the most horrifying albums I've ever listened to. But Lingua Ignota's Caligula, like I said, is the most impressive vocal performance you'll hear out of any of the albums I mentioned today, and it's worth a listen. It is. I know it's not going to be for everybody, but I would highly recommend giving it a listen at least just once in your life. So I have Caligula at number 9. Let's move on to number 8. At number 8, we have an album that I actually have on vinyl. I actually own half of the albums that I'll talk about today on vinyl, so when I get a chance, I will show you guys. This one is, of course, Atrocity Exhibition by Danny Brown. Now, you might be wondering, why is this on my most horrifying albums list? You might bump this in the car. You might actually enjoy this album. It might not scare you too much, but the first time I listened to it, it was in 2016 or 2017, shortly after the album came out, and it was one of those music listening experiences that is just completely personal to me. I was having a tough time, maybe a little depressed, a little moody, feeling that high school angst, and I just sat in my bedroom one night with the lights off. Nobody bothered me. I think my mom was away. Nobody home. I put this on full blast and just listened to it straight for the whole hour, and it was quite the experience. I felt like I was in a downward spiral. I felt like I was spiraling out into this chaotic world, all these new sounds to me. This was kind of the first time I really got deep into experimental hip hop music. After listening to this album, I got into stuff like Death Grips and Clipping, another artist that I'll talk about here in a second, and so many other fantastic artists I got into because I listened to this album first. And it feels almost like the movie Requiem for a Dream. Very, very similar in tone, very similar in experience. Requiem for a Dream, for those of you who don't know, is a fantastic film. I believe it came out the year I was born. I think it came out in 2000. And it's about two characters, well, multiple characters, not just two. I think it's like 3 or 4 characters who get involved with drug addiction in a horrible way. And the film depicts it in a very just raw fashion. And you watch these characters kind of spiral out throughout the film. The soundtrack's amazing too. It really adds to the dynamism of it. But you start spiraling out with these characters, and by the end of it, you're at rock bottom. You're in the lowest place possible. And this album kind of feels the same way to me. It feels like if Requiem for a Dream was an album, it would be this album. So for that reason, I have it on my list. It was just the first time that I ever listened to it alone in a dark room. It kind of terrified me a little bit, sent me on a trip. So for me, this is personally on my list, but if it's not on your list, that's totally fine. Like I said, I think a lot of people bump this in the car and stuff. There's some really banger tracks on this album, stuff that's not too scary. So go check it out. You might really enjoy this album. It's one of my favorites of all time. I have Atrocity Exhibition at number 8. So number 7 and number 6, I'm going to mention them both at the same time because both of these albums are from the same artist. As I just alluded to previously, I'm going to talk about Clipping. So their first album was, well, not their first album. The first album that's on my list today is their 2019 album. There existed an addiction to blood, and I do have this one on vinyl as well. I love the cover. I love these little nails sticking out, popping out of the cover. It looks really cool. And their next album, Visions of Bodies Being Burned, also I have on vinyl and has a very similar cover as well. I don't know if I'm holding it the right way up here, but teeth this time and a very similar layout. So you put these two albums together and they look nice next to each other. Sometimes I lay them on my shelves and kind of display them. They're cool albums. Why do I love them sonically, though? Well, David Diggs, who is kind of the brain of the operation when it comes to Clipping, he's also the lead vocalist, the rapper. He, you might know him from Hamilton. He put together 2 albums here that are so heavily inspired from horror that I could not have not put them on my list. Now, were these the most terrifying experiences I ever had listening to music? Maybe not. They certainly were eerie. They certainly were uncomfortable at times, especially the more industrial bits where it just sounds like straight noise. But for the most part, a lot of these tracks have gone on to some of my most played playlists. There's a lot of tracks on these albums that I really like. They're hard. They hit good. They're good for working out. They're good for driving around to. But if you listen to either one of these albums from start to finish, you'll see that they are littered with horror themes. They have pianos taken straight out of the Halloween movies. They have little bits of dialogue that reference Freddy Krueger and Jason and all these characters. They're so infused with especially 80s horror themes and horror tropes that I think these albums are kind of perfect albums to listen to around Halloween. Every time October rolls around, I always find myself coming back to these albums, putting them on, and they just really get me into the mood of Halloween and spooky season. And for those reasons, I have these 2 records on my list. But you may listen to them and not find anything scary about them. You may listen to them and find those industrial noise sections quite terrifying. It just depends on how your ears work, I guess. But I absolutely love both of these albums, so that's why I'm putting them on my list today. And like I said, the album covers are awesome too. So are the album names. Visions of Bodies Being Burned. There existed an addiction to blood. Those are awesome names for albums. So shout out to Clipping. They're one of my favorite rap groups of all time. And I have those 2 albums at number 6 and number 7. Now, the next album on my list is, again, a little bit of a weird one because I think a lot of people will not consider this a horrifying or a terrifying album. They won't consider it scary so much as they consider it sad, depressive, and just a lonely album. It makes you feel like you're alone. And maybe it's for those reasons that every time I listen to this album, my mind goes very spooky places. And I find that my mind itself just wanders off into scary lands. And maybe that's why I'm putting this record here today. It's Have a Nice Life's Death Consciousness. It also happens to be one of my top 5 favorite albums of all time, so maybe I'm just putting it here today to talk about it. But I find my mind going to some pretty dark places whenever I listen to this album, especially when I listen to it front to back. It is... It's magnificent, and I wish I could talk more about this album today, but I don't want to rant too long. It has so many of my favorite songs on it. This vinyl record's actually quite beautiful. It comes in a nice green there. And a little bit about this album, just a little bit of history. It's made by 2 friends, 2 guys that basically made this album for the total cost of $1,000. They have here on the inside of the cover, I'll put up an image on screen, what they used: a computer, Logic, a Digitech GNX4, an MIDI controller, an old toy piano that Tim found, a shitty keyboard from the 80s, a guitar, and a bass. And with those items, they were able to make this album, which is to me one of the greatest albums ever made. Just 2 guys kind of in a garage or a bedroom. I don't know exactly where they made it, but just 2 guys made this album, and it's very, very profound. It takes me a lot of interesting places. I'll talk more about it at some point in the future because, like I said, it's one of my favorite albums of all time. But today, I wanted to put it on my list because, like I said, my mind wanders some very scary and dangerous places when I listen to this album. So yeah, I have Death Consciousness at number 5. At number 4, as I mentioned before, we're going to be covering the artist who Lingua Ignota, Christian Hater, was with before their horrible breakup. I guess it's not a horrible breakup. It's a good thing they broke up because the relationship is what was toxic. But this album by Daughters, You Won't Get What You Want, is fantastic. And yes, I do like it even more than Caligula. It was even more terrifying than listening to Caligula. Maybe it's because it's coming from the side of the perpetrator, from the aggressor. When it comes to that relationship, again, I don't know all the details of that relationship, so I don't want to speak too heavily on it, but certainly it definitely motivated both albums, and this one is intense. This is maybe the most intense album I've ever listened to in my life. It's definitely up there. You could probably argue the Gnaw Their Tongues album is a little bit more extreme and intense, but this is up there, man. This is quite a ride. This has a lot of noise in it. It's very industrial. But it finds a way to create some beautiful melodies, and it finds a way to be beautiful, despite how horrifying it is. The more I come back to this record, the more I find beauty in it. And I know that that's a weird thing to say, because if you ever listen to this record, you know it's just pure chaos. But it's a fantastic record. I love it more and more the more I listen to it. And it's one of the greatest records I've ever heard in my life. Again, phenomenal vinyl coloring here. It's like perfectly clear. You can basically see my face through it. So that's quite cool. I love spinning this album. So many of my favorite songs are on here. Long Road, No Return, Satan in the Wait, The Lord's Song, The Reasons They Hate Me, that's another good one. Ocean Song. Basically every single track on this album goes hard, and it's intense. It's quite the experience. If you've never listened to this album before, please go check it out. It's worth listening at least once in your life. So I have Daughters, You Won't Get What You Want at number 4. So getting into our top 3, unfortunately, I don't own any of the top 3 albums I'm about to talk about on vinyl. I wish I did. I own a couple records from the band I'm about to talk about next, and that is Swans. And the record that I have at number 3 is The Seer from 2012. Now, look at this cover. The cover alone creeps me out, and it's spooky and weird, and why are the cat's eyes like that? It's a weird cover, but I love it. I love staring at it when I listen to the music. And The Seer, well, it's hard to describe The Seer. It's almost 2.5 hours. It's a 2-hour experience that you can't exactly replicate. You can't get it from any other band. Maybe Godspeed You Black Emperor. They're the band that comes the closest to Swans, but you can't get it from any other piece of art. I've never engaged with anything quite like Swans. Swans to me, and I know this is going to be a controversial thing to say, if I was being objective, which you can never be fully objective when you're analyzing art, you can never be fully subjective either. I think both things are intertwined together. You can obviously look at things more subjectively if you're ranking your favorites. Like today I'm ranking the albums that are my favorites in a way, the albums that have scared me the most. It's a very personal list, right? So it's very subjective. But you can also rank things kind of objectively, what you think the best or greatest bands are, or the best or greatest directors are, kind of separating your own personal taste from it for a second and trying to analyze things objectively. Who do you think the best is? Now, again, you can never separate your own subjective taste from there. When you order things, are you going to put Kubrick above Kurosawa? At that point, it just becomes subjective, right? But for me, if I was trying to break down who I thought the best band of all time was, the best band to ever make music, I might have to point to Swans, even over the Beatles, Pink Floyd, Radiohead, all those great bands. For me, Swans is a little bit different because they go deeper than any other band. They take their time. They'll give you a 30-minute song that slowly expands and becomes something enormous by the end of it. They take their time with their albums, too. And they've had so much consistency over the years. This is a band that started back in the early 80s, and they're still making music today. In fact, they released one of my favorite albums of the year this year in 2025, Birthing. I'll talk about that more at the end of the year, but this band has been insanely consistent all the way through, largely thanks to Michael Gira, who's the head of the band, the conceptual leader of the band, the only consistent member through the entire band's history. He has created with this band something that is truly, truly special. They have, in my opinion, probably 10 masterpieces, which I don't think I could say the same for when it comes to Pink Floyd, Radiohead, or the Beatles. I don't know if there's any other band in history that has made as many masterpieces as Swans has. And they made 3 in quick succession in, I think it was 2012, 2014, and 2016. They released The Seer, To Be Kind, and The Glowing Man, which is part of a trilogy. I have To Be Kind, I have The Glowing Man, I don't have The Seer yet, but The Seer is the most horrifying out of the 3. It goes the deepest, the darkest, and it plays with the most interesting sounds in a lot of ways too. And I think it has the most impressive vocal performances on it as well, although Michael Gira on To Be Kind is something to behold. But if you've never engaged with Swans, I highly recommend doing it. This is not a band that's accessible. They're not a band that you'll hear on the radio like the Beatles, Pink Floyd, or Radiohead. But if you take your time with them, if you come back to them, you have some patience, and you give them the time, eventually you'll come around on it. Eventually things will click, and eventually they might become maybe your favorite band of all time. I know they're up there for me. They're in my top 3 of all time, that's for sure. Swans has impacted me on an artistic level more than almost anybody I can name. Only Dostoevsky, Shakespeare, and a couple artists throughout history have ever had such a profound impact on me as Swans has. And they came back after a 13-year hiatus to make this album. They had originally, or they had for a while, completely disbanded and quit the band. After Soundtracks for the Blind, the band was essentially over. And then they came back, and they came back in a monstrous way, releasing this trilogy of albums, like I said, starting with The Seer, and then going on another run, even later, and now creating albums like Birthing, which came out this year, which is another phenomenal album. So this band has gone through multiple iterations. It's gone through multiple deaths and revivals, and each time they come back stronger. And for me, one of their high points is The Seer. It's a horrifying album. I can't say enough about it. Please go listen to it. Please go and listen to the title track, The Seer. It's 30 minutes long. I know that that's a lot of time to invest into one song, but if you listen to it from start to finish, I promise you, you'll have a pretty unique musical experience. And I can't stress it enough. Please go listen to Swans. If there's one band today that I force you guys to go listen to, I would hope that it would be Swans, because they're like I said, maybe the best band of all time. So let's move on now to my number 2 pick, which is also an album by Swans. It's an album that's a little bit more horrifying for me. It goes a lot deeper. For me, it's their magnum opus. It's their masterpiece. It's, of course, Soundtracks for the Blind. Soundtracks for the Blind, for me, is possibly the greatest album ever made. I put it right up there with In Rainbows, Wish You Were Here. Name whatever album you think is the best one to ever be created, and I think Soundtracks for the Blind lives up to any of those. If in fact, it might even surpass them, because this is a 2.5-hour-long album. Yes, you heard that right. It's as long as a Christopher Nolan film, but it's worth the experience. It's transcendent. It's ethereal. It takes you to places you've never been before, and it cracks your mind in a way that only one other album on my list has ever cracked my mind. This album has sent me into mania. It sent me into nearly a depression. It's It's evoked some very powerful emotions from me in a way that I didn't think music was capable of. You know, I've seen films in my life and I've read books that have emotionally crushed me and left me a different person afterwards. And it rarely happens with music for some reason, but there have been some albums, there have been some pieces of music that have truly transformed me in ways that I can't even describe. And Soundtracks for the Blind is right up there for me. Jira himself described this album in a beautiful way. In fact, he had a beautiful description for The Seer as well. He said, "The Seer was like being trapped in a hurricane of sound." I love that description for the album. I think it's absolutely true. For Soundtracks for the Blind, he said it was like a soundtrack for a non-existent film. I know that's not as powerful or as visually evoking as a hurricane of sound, but I think it's so true. I think it really grasps what the album feels like. For me, Soundtracks for the Blind, if Atrocity Exhibition is Requiem for a Dream put into musical form, I think Soundtracks for the Blind is the musical form of Inland Empire. Now, if you've never seen Inland Empire by David Lynch, I highly recommend it. If you're into Swans' music and you've already listened to Soundtracks for the Blind, but you've never seen Inland Empire, well, you're doing yourself a disservice. You should watch that film because I'm sure it'll resonate with you. Inland Empire, I'll talk about that film a little bit more in another video that I'm going to release shortly here, my top 10 most horrifying films. But that's another one that's just abstract, weird, disjointed, ethereal, broken away from reality in ways that you can't even describe. You don't even know if it's a film. It feels like an anti-film. It's a film within a film, but then it's also an anti-film. It's hard to describe Inland Empire, just like it's hard to describe Soundtracks for the Blind. So you just have to go listen to it for yourself and experience it for yourself. And then you guys can come back to this video and let me know what you guys thought. Because, like I said, it might be the best album ever created. It reaches depths that I've never heard any other album reach. So Soundtracks for the Blind, one of the most horrifying music experiences I've ever had in my life. I have that at number 2. There is still an album that tops it, and that's my number 1 album. And my final album that I'll mention today is the most terrifying musical experience I've ever had in my life. It's also one of the most terrifying experiences I've ever had in my life, period. Outside of music, outside of engaging with art. It's one of the most scary things I've ever experienced, period. It's Leland Kirby's, well, you might know him better as The Caretaker, Everywhere at the End of Time. This was released between 2016 and 2019. It's technically 6 albums, but they all kind of go together into one. It's a 6-hour-long project, so I understand why a lot of people are not going to listen to the whole thing. And actually, it's supposed to be experienced in one sitting. You're supposed to sit through it from hour 1 to hour 6 in one sitting and experience the whole thing all the way through. So I know a lot of people aren't going to do that either. A lot of people don't have 6 hours in their day where they're going to sit down on a couch or in a chair somewhere and just listen to a piece of music for 6 hours and not do anything else. I know that that's a lot to ask out of people, but if you do it once in your life, if you listen to this album just once in your life, you'll have an experience like no other. You'll have an experience that Leland Kirby set out to manufacture of experiencing Alzheimer's for yourself. You're going to experience the decay of your own brain from listening to this album. At least that's the goal of this album. This project was heavily inspired by The Shining. It takes a lot from the ballroom music used in The Shining and also the overall atmosphere from the film of The Shining. Now, I'm not so much talking about the book, but the film itself creates this transcendental world where you feel like you're in a back room. You feel like you're in between reality, like you're stuck somewhere that doesn't exist, where time and space are folded in on themselves and nothing really makes sense. And that's what this album sets out to recreate. It recreates that feeling in a great way. And it is a feeling that The Shining creates very well, especially with the last scene there, where you zoom in on that photograph and you see that Jack Torrance was there in 1921 and you go, how is this possible? None of this makes sense. And it's a complete mind trip. And this album does that in ways as well, because both of those pieces of art, this one, Everything Everywhere, Everything Everywhere, Everywhere at the End of Time, and The Shining, both create kind of a world that feels like your mind is decaying, feels like screws are coming loose, like you don't know where you are, you don't know what time it is, you don't even know who you are, and things start to, screws start to come loose. And that was the entire goal of this album. This album was meant to recreate the feeling of going through Alzheimer's, of slowly losing parts of your memory, of things coming untwined, and It's quite an experience. If there's a film that can replicate this the best, it's actually not even The Shining. It's a film that came out a few years ago and actually won Anthony Hopkins the Best Actor award. I think he's the oldest actor to ever win Best Actor because he played such a fantastic performance in The Father. Now, The Father pairs beautifully with Everywhere at the End of Time. I would watch that film and listen to this album in the same time period because they touch on the same thing. The Father is a film that depicts Alzheimer's. It depicts the decay of a brain, but it doesn't just depict it. It's not just the acting. It's the way the film is shot, edited, and put together. The whole film is out of sequence. The whole film feels like a brain that has fallen apart and doesn't know what time is past, what time is present, what time is future. It's a very, very confusing film, but it's powerful. And it captures a lot of the same emotions that I felt when I listened to Everywhere at the End of Time. When I first listened to this record, yes, I did sit down for 6 hours and listen to this thing from front to back without doing anything, just sitting in a chair and just listening to it. I did take a couple bathroom breaks here and there. I wasn't perfect, but at the end of this experience, I truly think I got somewhat of a glimpse of the feeling of losing your memory and losing your mind. I think I got a glimpse of that. At least that's what it felt like by the end of it. And I've also worked in hospitals. I actually worked for 3 years as a security guard in hospitals, and a lot of that time I spent in old folks' homes. I spent in extended care where people were at the end of their lives. A lot of them were experiencing Alzheimer's. A lot of them were losing their minds and dying right in front of me. So I have seen this in person. I do have experience with this stuff, so I can say with relative confidence, obviously I haven't been a nurse for 30 years. I only worked 3 years in a hospital, but with relative confidence, I can say that this album does thoroughly depict what it looks like to have a mind lose its memory and to lose its place. A little interesting fact about this album is the artist actually destroyed all of the master files after releasing it, kind of symbolizing the full loss of memory. So that's quite interesting. That was a little fact about this album that I didn't know about before researching this video, and I found that to be quite cool. So for me, the most terrifying music experience I've ever had in my life was sitting down for 6 hours and listening to The Caretakers Everywhere at the End of Time. No other album has made me feel so much dread, so much displacement in my own mind. And I encourage you guys all to go do the same thing. If you have 6 hours to spend and you don't know how to spend it, maybe you can spend it having the most terrifying music experience of your life. If you guys disagree with me and you think there's albums that should have been on this list, let me know down below in the comments. There was a lot of albums that I was going to include that I didn't. A few of them are Il était une forêt by Gris is a fantastic album. I wanted to put on my list today, but I just didn't have room for it. I probably should have put it over Atrocity Exhibition if I'm being honest, but Gris's Il était une forêt is a phenomenal what is it? No, it's a DSBM album. That's technically the genre. Depressive, I won't say this word because I can't say it in my video. Black metal. It's phenomenal. It's very, very dark. There's a couple other ones too. Godspeed You Black Emperor. I probably could have included any of their albums on this list. They have some really horrifying music as well. Maybe Dark Throne or Emperor could have made this list if I wanted to include so much black metal, but I wanted to limit it a bit because black metal is one of the most horrifying genres in general, so I didn't want my list to be overrepresented by black metal. Another album that I wanted to include on my list, so I will give an honorable mention to it, is Spiderland by Slint. That's another album that makes me feel really weird and eerie and somewhat depressive, I guess. So that's another scary album in some ways for me. So if you guys want to leave down below in the comments which albums have terrified you the most, I love hearing from you guys. So let me know down below. Give me a couple reasons why those albums terrified you. I love hearing from you guys. If you guys like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends to help boost this channel and the algorithm. And with that all out of the way, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.